Добрий вечір. Всіх вітаю на сьогоднішньому вебінарі. Будь ласка, напишіть у чаті, чи мене чути. Також буду рада побачити, звідки ви дивитесь цей вебінар. Угу. Бачу деякі реакції. Добре, дякую. Тож, поки ми чекаємо на всіх, будь ласка, напишіть, звідки ви. Угу. Супер, Київ. Супер. Так. Гаразд. Давайте тоді починати. Мене звати Ступицька Надія, я старша викладачка, методистка мережі шкіл Green Country, а також я тренерка навчально-методичного центру Green Country, а також TalkEn.Cloud платформи. Отже, сьогодні ми з вами зібралися завдяки платформі TalkEn.Cloud, тому трошечки часу я приділю для того, щоб розповісти, що таке ця платформа TalkEn.Cloud. Далі я поясню деякі організаційні моменти, пов'язані з цим вебінаром, і після чого ми пройдемося по моментах, зазначених на екрані, тобто ви можете бачити план сьогоднішнього вебінару. Отже, давайте розпочинати. І що ж таке платформа TalkEn.Cloud? Перш за все, це бібліотека інтерактивних підручників. Друге, це система менеджменту навчального процесу, а також Академія розвитку мовних шкіл. Давайте розглянемо трошки детальніше, що представляє собою бібліотека інтерактивних підручників. Отже, на платформі представлено 50 інтерактивних цифрових підручників для рівнів від Pre-A1 до C1. Ці підручники розроблені як для школярів, так і для дорослих, тобто це окремі категорії. На платформі ви можете знайти Teacher's Guide. Це деталізовані плани занять до кожного підручника, до кожного уроку, де поступово прописані всі етапи уроку, всі інструкції до кожної вправи, дуже деталізовано. Крім того, ви можете бачити трекінг прогресу учнів у виконанні завдань у підручнику. Ви можете бачити на екрані, як це виглядає, тобто ви можете бачити, наскільки учень виконав вправ, яку кількість він виконав від загальної кількості, а також наскільки ці відповіді були коректними. Тобто два види відсотків ви можете побачити. Також система тестів з автоматизованою перевіркою до кожного підручника, а також placement тест. Тобто placement тест допомагає викладачу визначити початковий рівень студента, з яким він до вас прийшов, а також за допомогою автоматизованих тестів, тобто тестів з автоматичною перевіркою, ви можете швидко і легко відслідковувати прогрес ваших учнів. Далі, на платформі також можете побачити велику кількість інтерактивних воркшитів, а також можете створювати власні воркшити за потребами. Тобто це можуть бути воркшити, які стосуються безпосередньо теми вашого уроку, або, наприклад, якоїсь події, або якимось новинам, тобто все, що ви хочете задіяти на своєму уроці. Далі, стосовно системи менеджменту навчального процесу, що це собою втілює? Перш за все, викладач може створити профіль своїх учнів. Також є можливість об'єднати ці профілі цих студентів у певні групи або призначати індивідуальні заняття. Крім того, ви можете згенерувати розклад уроків. Можете також бачити на екрані, як це приблизно виглядатиме. Тобто ви бачите, коли відбувається який урок, і таким чином можете будувати свій день, свій робочий час. Також є можливість прикріплення вступного тесту, про який я розповідала раніше, який автоматично визначить рівень студента. Звісно, ви можете його переглянути. Також є можливість організувати розклади роботи вчителя та є в наявності електронний журнал. На платформі є можливість, тобто платформа містить домашні завдання для учнів до кожного уроку, тобто це дуже економить час викладача для підготовки, так, не тільки уроку, але й домашніх завдань. Платформа є дуже зручною, якщо ви тільки починаєте працювати в онлайн форматі, до цього не мали ніякого досвіду у проведенні онлайн занять. Ну і, звісно, ви можете відслідковувати прогрес виконання завдань на платформі. Ось що собою втілює платформа TalkEn.Cloud. Ну і також, як я вже і зазначала, це Академія розвитку мовних школ, тобто допомагаємо у розвитку вашої школи, вас як викладачів, тому долучайтеся. Супер. Тоді переходимо до організаційних моментів, які стосуються безпосередньо сьогоднішнього нашого вебінару. Так, що маю зазначити? Коли ви реєструвалися на цей вебінар, ви мали б отримати лист на вашу поштову скриньку з реквізитами для оплати. Що це за реквізити? Це реквізити на оплату сертифікату, в разі якщо ви хочете його отримати. Коштує такий сертифікат 100 гривень. Що потрібно зробити, щоб його отримати? Перш за все, протягом 24 годин після цього вебінару ви отримаєте, всі, хто сплатив за реквізитами, отримаєте тест, який потрібно пройти. Якщо ви отримаєте 80 або більше відсотків правильних відповідей за цей тест, тоді ви автоматично отримуєте цей сертифікат. Що важливо, те, що кількість спроб не є обмеженою. Тобто ви можете спробувати 1, 2, а якщо треба, і 3 рази. Так, також після цього вебінару, а саме на наступний день ви отримаєте summary цього вебінару, тобто основні моменти, про які ми сьогодні будемо говорити. І таким чином можете ще раз пройтися по інформації, яку ми сьогодні обговорюватимемо. Якщо ви не сплатили за реквізитами, але хочете це зробити, звісно, що це можливо і після вебінару, але обов'язково не забувайте надіслати скрін оплати на поштову скриньку. Ось такі організаційні моменти стосовно цього вебінару. Якщо щось не казала або маєте запитання, можете написати в чаті, спробую протягом вебінару відповісти на них. Отже, давайте починати наш сьогоднішній вебінар, який присвячено автономії студентів, тобто Developing Learner Autonomy. Отже, давайте почнемо з вами з маленького вступу. I would ask you to answer a couple of questions about autonomy. So look at my screen and please answer in the chat. How do you define learner autonomy? So it's a multidimensional concept, and everyone might have different understanding of this. So what is learner autonomy for you? It would be nice if you put the number and your answer. For example, number one and the answer that you have. Let's share ideas. So take your time. You're welcome to share your ideas in the chat. What is learner autonomy? How do you understand it? The second question, to what extent do you think your students are autonomous? Where one is not autonomous at all and 10 totally autonomous, independent students. You can also mention group, category, age, whatever you think is important. All right. It would be nice if you mention if you're working with young learners, teenagers, or maybe adults. All right. Thank you for your answers. So about the meaning of learner autonomy. Learning at own pace, gaining knowledge without any help, setting personal learning goals, an ability to understand the task and do it on their own, learning in your own pace, speed. Okay, thank you. To what extent do you think your students are autonomous? Okay, such different answers. So it probably depends on a variety of factors. Okay, number three, how much do you feel you promote your students' autonomy? One, not really. 10, I definitely promote my students' autonomy. I do my best. All right. Thank you. Reading your answers. All right. You're really lucky if your students are autonomous and you do your best in promoting their autonomy. Wonderful. Probably their state of being autonomous is the result of your promotion. Okay, and the last question. What challenges do you face promoting learner autonomy? What is the difficulty that you have in promoting learner autonomy? Whether it is lack of knowledge, lack of time, age, level of proficiency, whatever, you're welcome to mention maybe something else. So what are the challenges that you have? You and your students, probably, you can also mention. All right. So you're welcome to continue answering the questions. If you're watching this webinar later, you can stop at this moment and take some notes to reflect a bit. All right, so let's move on. What does it mean, autonomy? Let's discuss. So here you can see some information about what it is. So the first meaning of autonomy is the right of an organization, country, or region to be independent and govern itself. So it's definitely not about the autonomy that we are going to speak today. But what type of autonomy are we going to speak today is the ability to make your own decisions without being controlled by someone else. So this is the general understanding of the word autonomy. It's not that much about teaching or learning. It's just some kind of general notion. Then You might have a question, what about language learning? What does it mean in language learning? So, um, first of all, this term was firstly mentioned in the late 70s of the previous century. And it was the report after a conference. And the author of this report was Henry Hollick, who introduced this term as autonomy in terms of language learning. So, what did he mean by autonomy is the ability to take charge of one's own learning. And Henry Hollick understood this ability as an attribute of a learner. So, mostly it was considered that a student might either have this attribute or not. So, two options. Then the new understanding of this term was introduced by Dickinson. So he understood it as the situation in which the learner is totally responsible for all the decisions concerned with his learning and the implementation of those decisions. And here we can see a little bit different perspective on this term, and it is more about learning situation, about learning process that influences. And there were, of course, many other different studies of different educators and scientists who worked with this term. And one of them was Liddell, who covered the psychological aspect of this term. He also thought about whether it is about independence or interdependence of a student while learning. So, how independent the learner is, or is it not about independence at all, but it's more about interdependence, connection with other students, with the teacher, and so on. So, you might think how is it useful to dedicate time to developing learners' autonomy? So here are some things why it is worth mentioning, why it is worth working on. So the first one is responsibility development. So by developing students' autonomy, you make students responsible for their own learning. Later on, you shift your responsibility as a teacher to students for their results, their achievement, their learning in general. So students become more confident, more independent, and they can make decisions on their own. They can identify goals. They can choose the best strategies for learning in general or for completing particular activities and so on. And of course, they can evaluate their progress. They can see their real state of things regarding their knowledge and skills and abilities. The second reason why it's important to develop student autonomy is because it boosts motivation. Students have different activities, different situations where they can make decisions. It can be about choosing the way to complete the activity. It might be about the activity itself, about the ways to deal with something, and so on. And by seeing the results, by being engaged in the process, they are more likely to stay or to become motivated. The third thing about learner autonomy and the reason to work on it is development of critical thinking of your students. As developing learner autonomy requires reflection from your students, it creates the need for them to be active decision makers and problem solvers. And this is a useful skill not only for language learning, but also for real life situations. So it's a rather useful skill to have. Then it maintains lifelong learning. So, what does it mean being autonomous? It means that you have some ideas in your head about how to learn, what to learn, in what way to learn, and so on. And by obtaining these skills, students will be able to continue their learning not only inside the school, not only at the lesson, but also later in their life. So they are some basic skills that are really helpful for students to develop on their own. The next thing is that learner autonomy definitely improves student results because independent learners are more engaged, more active, more confident. They are more eager to participate in different activities. They are willing to interact with other students, with the teacher, and so on. They definitely get more from the learning process. They have better results, more achievements because they are active and experiencing different situations, a different task completion makes their results better for sure. Also, developing learner autonomy prepares students for real life communication. So, if your students are autonomous, they are confident, they have a high self esteem, they are seeking for opportunities to communicate, to use language. So, that's why they are not afraid of communicating with foreigners or not foreigners, just other people in English. So the last aspect why we need to develop learner autonomy is that it helps to make learning personalized. So because students can decide, they can choose the best ways of doing things. That's why their process of learning becomes more personalized. All right, so let's move on. And we are going to speak about levels of learner autonomy. So, as I mentioned earlier, firstly, it was considered that students either are autonomous or aren't autonomous. So, two options. Um, two opposite sides. Later on, new ideas appeared, and that's why we are speaking about levels of autonomy today. Um, there are two categories of factors that influence students' autonomy. Firstly, it's student himself, yeah, or herself, and their characteristics and environment or learning situation. So everything connected to learning. So I would ask you to type in the chat what students' characteristics do you think influence autonomy in language learning, and also write some factors from a student's environment, from their learning situation that might influence their level of autonomy in this or that way. So, welcome. Waiting for your answers in the chat. Please share your ideas. Let's teach and learn from each other. All right. So think of different categories of students. All right, students' characteristics: self-motivation, love for studying, understanding own goals. All right, thank you. Might be, yeah, so whether students are motivated or not, it's a very important thing to mention. Yeah, teachers support. Okay, thank you. Yeah. So you're welcome to continue typing, and mm, at the same time, you can compare your ideas with some of my ideas. So, as for students' characteristics, first of all, it's students' age. Of course, if you're working with young learners or very young learners and adults or teenagers, they definitely have different levels of autonomy. Mm, because of some factors, yeah, because of some particular characteristics of a particular age. So their state of development, physically, mentally, and so on. Second moment is psychological readiness or psychological capacity. It's how ready your students are to work in autonomously, to take responsibility for their studying, and so on. Then cognitive abilities. For example, whether your students understand abstract nouns or not, whether they are like adults who have all the levels of cognitive abilities developed more or less, or the young learners who are only in the process of um, obtaining different abilities, cognitive in the same, in particular, sorry. Then learning styles. There are different classifications regarding learning styles, but what might be help like useful in terms of speaking about autonomy is whether our students are field dependent or field independent. Field dependent, those who rely on teachers' guidance, very clear and precise instructions, scaffolding, and so on. And field independent students who are quite autonomous, who are quite independent, they are not afraid of working on their own, and so on. Then level of proficiency, level of their English is also the thing that defines students' autonomy. Of course, if you work with beginners, they just don't know some English words, a lot of English words that they don't know. So it also influences their motivation, their confidence, and as a result, their autonomy. They are not sure, they are not confident in what they are saying, what they are doing, and so on. They are not even confident in whether they understand you correctly. So this is very important to take into account. When we speak about learning situation or environment, what is important? Lesson objectives and approaches. What are the aims of the lesson? What approaches and methods the teacher uses? They also somehow influence students' autonomy. Some lessons require more autonomy from students. Some frameworks require less autonomy from students. So this is essential to remember. Then cultural influence also is very important. For example, in some cultures, girls are probably shy. They are not very active in communication with other people, especially with male students. So this is something to remember. Then classroom environment. What kind of relationship do your students have? What rapport do you have? The quality of interaction among students and with the teacher as well. Also, types of tasks and activities and their formats also determine the level of students' autonomy within the lesson. And of course, teaching style and like the way the teacher provides information or elicits information from students and so on. What about the levels of autonomy? So there are different ways of understanding levels of autonomy of students. For example, according to David Noonan, there are five stages that a student passes in order to obtain the highest level of autonomy. So, what are they? The first stage is awareness. So, learners can identify learning goals at this stage. They can identify these strategies. So, they know that they exist, that they know and understand them. They are aware of their learning styles. What do they prefer? Learning by listening to something, or by reading something, or they prefer visual support, or whatever. They know what formats are best for them to in order to achieve their aims. Then the second level is involvement. So learners become participants learning of creating learning goals. So they are still a little bit passive because they choose from the suggested options. They do not introduce their own learning goals by themselves. The third level is intervention. This is where students start adjusting the learning goals according to their particular needs. The next stage is creation, when learners create their own learning objectives, and they can make up, yeah, they can understand what activities, what tasks they need to complete in order to reach their objectives. And the last one is transcendence. It's the level at which learners connect their classroom activities, they are learning, to real world situations. They implement, they use their knowledge and skills not only within the lesson but also in their own lives. There is one more classification of levels of autonomy introduced by Littlewood. So they are language acquisition. So it's the ability of students to use language independently and communicate effectively in different situations. So it's about language acquisition. The next one is a learning approach. So the students take responsibilities for their own learning. They use the strategies that are useful for them. So this is about how they learn. If language acquisition is about what they learn, then learning approach is about how they learn, how what actions they take in order to gain this knowledge. And the last one is personal development. So it's about general development of a person, not only in the sphere of education, but in general. So they are on the three categories that were identified by Littlewood. But what else was mentioned in his works is reactive autonomy and proactive autonomy. So reactive autonomy is when students react to already presented objectives. They react on what is already presented to them. So whether it's the task, whether it's the structure of the lesson, so they react when they have some kind of stimuli. So and proactive autonomy is acting before, yeah, like so they can think beforehand what they need to do, how they need to do, and they can consider different things in order to achieve their aims and goals. And one more classification, where the first level is raising awareness. So it's recognizing by students their own learning habits and importance of autonomy. The next is changing attitudes. So it's about change in students' mindset towards taking more responsibility for their learning. And the last one is transferring roles. So it's when students start taking control for their learning gradually, because it can't be done at once. Yeah, so gradually changing the role of a teacher and of a learner. So these are the main types of autonomy levels according to different classifications. Then, what are the skills and abilities of autonomous learners? Let's discuss this. So, um, there are the skills and abilities can be divided into three stages. Let's name them as forethought and planning. Then goes monitoring and control. And the third one is reflection and evaluation. So they are cycled and they are looped. So all these processes happen one by one without stop. So first, students need to be able to identify goals, to predict what steps they need to take in order to achieve their goals. They need to be able to plan their learning. Then the next is monitoring. It's about the process. So they need to analyze what are they doing, how successful it is, what to do, what to change. It's about tracking their process progress. Then the stage with reflection, so identifying strong points, weak points, evaluating them, and thinking again about what are the next aims, what are the next steps to improve their language level, and so on. So this is the cycle that repeats again and again. So when we speak about particular abilities of students who want to become autonomous, they are as follows. Firstly, its ability to learn independently. What is important here is that we do not need to think that independently means alone, because independently it's not always about working on their own, because the second skill that students need to be able to do is to cooperate and collaborate with other students. So it's about interaction with others, being able to deal with different situations, different types of people, and to achieve their common goals. The third skill that is very important to become autonomous learner is to be able to evaluate progress and own results. The next one is track the progress. So it's important not only to see the final result, but also to see the procedure of achieving the aims. And the last skill is to be able to identify strengths and weaknesses in your knowledge and in your abilities and skills. So let us move on and speak a little bit about challenges in language autonomy promotion. So there are, of course, different types of students, different types of approaches, different types of teachers, and we all have different challenges on our way to develop students' autonomy. So you will see the list of most frequently mentioned problems, both for students and teachers who work with learner autonomy. And in the chat, you can mention which of these challenges do you particularly have in your experience, which ones you face or which ones you've noticed teachers have, or which ones students possess, and so on. So, the first one, dependence on the teacher for guidance. So, this is mostly about field dependent students who can't do anything if the teacher is not present in the breakout room or if the teacher is not next to this student. These kids very often really do not know what to do, how to do, and they really rely on teacher and very precise and non-stop guidance. The next thing is fixed curriculum and standardized materials. So, what is the problem here is that probably with fixed curricula, that teachers have no time to dedicate to the development of learner autonomy, like as much time as it would be okay for this particular student or this particular group of students to develop these skills and abilities, and standardized materials that are not appropriate for your group, for your students. That might be also a challenge for a teacher. Then, insufficient resources, both for teachers and learners. So, if the number of materials is not enough, maybe lack of knowledge that is needed to develop students' autonomy, both for learners and teachers. The next one, learners' difficulty in using available materials. This might be, for example, if your students learn online, they might have difficulty using different online tools. For example, Zoom. Yeah, so they might not know how to use some tools there. They might not know how to join breakout rooms, how to type in the chat, how to share the screen, and it might be very difficult to work with this student online. Then learners' lack of experience in autonomous learning. So if the previous experience was with the teacher who was really guiding every step of each student, then it definitely becomes a problem. Or sometimes it happens when the student has the previous experience of learning English in one-to-one lesson, and then according to some situations, some factors, they need to switch to group work, and then this is the problem for the student because this student got used to a different procedure, different level of dependence on teacher. And then limited English proficiency of learners. This is what I mentioned earlier. So the pre-A1 learners and C1 learners, they definitely have different levels of autonomy, and and you have different approaches to working with them. And working with pre-A1 learners might be very challenging and in terms of working with their autonomy. Then minimal exposure to English beyond the classroom. So students do not live in an English world, English speaking country. Yeah, so they do not watch videos or films in English. So the only place where they really need to speak English, to listen to English, to perceive English is the lesson. So, and if you have lessons twice a week, for sure, it's really difficult to become autonomous. So it requires a lot of time, much more time than if you had students who watch videos, read books in English, and so on. Then restricted teacher autonomy. So this is also an important aspect, a challenge. If you are somehow limited in your freedom in teaching approaches, maybe because of fixed curricula, then of course it influences learner autonomy as well. Then teachers and students fixed mindset. It's about thinking that sometimes students think, I don't know how to do it, I don't know this, and that's it. So it's something that needs to be worked on. So somehow switching to a growth mindset when you see the current problem as the one that can be solved. Just you need to find the different solutions, but this is also very important to fix this mindset of student or of a teacher. Yeah, so we also might have some different thoughts in our head that we think are 100% correct, but they are not. They are only about our perception of this world, of definite situations, and our learners. Low motivation among students is another challenge that you and your students might face working on their autonomy. So you can see the list of different challenges. I would ask you to mention the ones that you face in teaching your students. What challenges do you have on the way to learner autonomy? And we are moving to the next part. Okay. So we are going to speak about strategies to develop learner autonomy. You can see several of them mentioned, but if to simplify, we can say that there are um, five strategies to work on. Firstly, it's working on students' knowledge and skills. So it's all about language acquisition. The second strategy is engaging students into effective and active communication. Then working with students' cognitive strategies. It's about task completing, what to do, how to do, and so on. And metacognitive strategies, it's their knowledge about how they learn, in what way they learn, what are their styles, and what strategies are the most useful for their learning. And also working on students' ability to reflect and evaluate their own um, learning progress and process. Let's discuss a couple like these strategies in some detail. So firstly, it's built up to given control. So it's about gradually changing the role of a teacher, where the teacher is the main source of information, and students are passive listeners. Switching to a different format where students are more active and more engaged in the activities. But it's not the one-step action. So you need to understand that it requires time. In order to make students able to take control, they need to have different skills. They need to have different knowledge about how to use online tools if you work online, how to complete some um, typical activities, how to communicate with other students. So this is what should be done gradually from lesson to lesson. Of course, you can't expect your students to start taking control from the very beginning because they don't know what it is to learn, how to learn, and so on. The next is encouraging learning environment. So it's about creating the atmosphere at the lesson in the group that motivates students to become autonomous learner. So it's about the relations with each other. It's about the quality of relation. with students, with the teacher, where everyone feels confident and safe learning. Yeah, so where the students are not afraid to perform, where the students are not afraid to speak up, where the students are not afraid to be ashamed of something, where they are not ashamed of their mistakes, where mistakes are considered to be their mm, mm, evidence of their progress of in their learning, not as something that can't be forgiven. So the next thing is assessment criteria and correction. So firstly, for our students to become autonomous, they need to understand what are the criteria according to which you as a teacher evaluate them, and they can later evaluate themselves. So it's very important to mention criteria to your students. Otherwise, it's very difficult to have the objective um, understanding of your level. Yeah, because it's just a guessing game then. So make sure you provide your students with criteria. You explain what is expected from them. If it is a peer correction that is very useful for developing learner autonomy, then students need to know what exactly to evaluate, and also make sure that the process of peer assessment and peer correction is not about criticizing each other, but it's about highlighting strengths and weaknesses as well. So both things must be mentioned. Also, you can help the students by providing some uh, checklists, for example, for student self-assessment. They can look at this checklist and see how fully they completed the task. If we speak about writing, for example, they can get this checklist and see, okay, I needed to write this thing. I needed to have 4 paragraphs. The length of this written assignment is 25 sentences. I need to use some linkers. I need to use some particular grammar, or I need to mention some synonyms, some antonyms. So when students have this information, they can reflect, they can analyze and evaluate their own works, and they can take it for their future. Yeah, they can take this knowledge for um, learning in general, not only in language learning. They can provide some, they can create some checklists for themselves later when they gain higher levels of their learner autonomy. Then examples as a reference. So it's very important to build students' autonomy, because if you don't know what to do, you don't know how the perfect, let's speak about the same written assignment looks like, you don't know what to aim at. Um, so that is what is needed for beginners, for example, or for young learners. When you ask them to write something, give them your example of this task completion. So, if, for example, your students need to write about their um, timetable, or they need to describe their day. Provide your example where you write about yourself, or not about yourself, about an imaginary character. Introduce this example to your students. Look together at what is mentioned there, so students can refer to it. Provide prompts. This is also very helpful for young learners and beginners, teenager beginners. The next strategy is to make sure that students feel um, they are achieving something. So feeling of achievement is important. If students do not get this feeling, it's not clear whether you are succeeding or not. It's not clear whether mm, you are good at something or not. Sometimes teachers attempt to neglect playing games, and they might vote for completing some written task, yeah, or filling the gaps or opening brackets. But if you have, for example, a choice to finish the competition or some quizzes game or Kahoot game, then let them finish this game. Let them have this feeling of achievement, because you don't know, maybe this is the student spend a lot of time getting ready for this lesson. Maybe the student did their best in order to win this game. And if you stop the competition or some kind of game in the very process, then they lose this motivation. And of course, later on, they won't be motivated to continue learning, to take responsibility for their learning. Um, let's speak about goal understanding in detail. So we discussed that the first stage of autonomy, of learner's autonomy, is understanding goals. There are different types of goals: long-term goals, short-term goals, lesson objectives, task and activity aim, communicative purpose. When we speak about long-term goals, we speak about like the main goal, why our students learn. If we are talking about kids and teenagers, they might not realize why they need English language in their life. So you might have some kind of discussion or some kind of quiz prepared for them at the beginning of learning process, so that they can they can they can spot, okay, this is why I might need English, or this is why I might need to know it. I want to travel. Okay, that's why that's my goal. I want to learn English because I want to travel freely or without any limits in communication. I want to become an international expert, or I want to live abroad, or whatever. You can help students in this. Short-term goals, it might be 1 week, 1 month. So as well, they need to have this kind of understanding. Of course, it's more complicated with young learners, but with teenagers, it's rather possible. What is rather relevant to both of the categories, young learners and teenagers, is lesson objectives. Make sure your students have an understanding what they are learning about during this lesson. You can and it's really recommended to add some kind of introduction of the topic, introduction of the aims. Why? Because if there is no connection of students' experience to some new information, it's very difficult to obtain knowledge. So try to connect the experience of students, something that they already know, with what you're going to teach them during the lesson. So try to discuss it a little bit, and in this way you will help them in identifying, in understanding goals, and they will better understand the material and the goal of the lesson. Then it's very important for students to understand the aim of the activity. So understanding instructions, what they are supposed to do, because sometimes it happens that teachers provide instructions, but when you join the breakout room, or if you work offline, or when you go to a particular peer of students or group of students, you can see the differences in their perception with what your intention was. So it's very important to make sure your students understand the aim of the task, the instruction that you provide. And communicative purpose. Make sure that for some speaking activities, students have an understanding. Why do I need to talk? Why do I need to listen to another student. So they need to have some kind of purpose. What might it be? Find similarities, find what is different, um, try to find out solution for this problem, whatever. It depends on the task, of course. Here you can see an example of a task. The task is really brief, so the students need to describe picture, and according to the main aim that is mentioned here, they need to um, mm, understand the difference between past simple and past continuous. Here you can see the description of this task for a teacher. And here you might see the ICQs, instruction checking questions, that are really important to mention, to ask your students, especially when they work with some freer practice task where they need to create something themselves. So it might reduce the chances that something is understood differently. Or if we speak about these type of tasks as find someone who is, it is a really complicated activity, and students might get lost in the procedure, what to do first, what to do next. So it's better to divide your instructions in order to make the task clear for students. So whether they need to just read these prompts or they need to reformulate these prompts into questions, what to do when they receive a particular answer, what name they need to write here, what means extra information. So all these small details is something that is needed for students to understand what is expected and for them to work independently, to be confident in what they are doing and how they are doing. The next thing is using learning tools and resources. If you work online, you might teach your students how to use online dictionaries. For example, what they can see in an online dictionary, whether it is the pronunciation, what means UK, US, so it's British or American version of pronunciation, what means see next to noun. So it's probably countable noun. So what is countable noun? So all these minor details might be time consuming to explain to your students, but they are really helpful in order to make your students autonomous learners. Or if you're working in Zoom, you need to firstly teach and explain how to use Zoom, what features it has. Or if you introduce the new activity, the new platform, whether it's new mode or the Quizlet game, because there are different modes which like you might not practice with using with your students, but you want to start using. So this is all that you need to take into account to remember before starting the activity. So make sure your students know how to use it, what to do and how to do in this task. Also, if you work with some online platforms, then for example, Mirror, as you can see here, teach your students how to highlight, how to type. So you can just take a screenshot and show them what are the features here, what they are able to do. So this will boost their autonomy as learners. So they will definitely use these uh, features on their own, even not during the lesson. Or you might see here the Padlet, and your students need to come up with their own ideas about some question. So you need to explain how to access this platform, what to type, where to type, and so on. Then proper routines. There are for sure a lot of reasons why to use routines and rules in your lessons. One of them is it reduces stress and if you have no stress in your lesson, there is more chance that your students become autonomous because they will not work on their psychological state. They will be more focused on the language acquisition. Then, presence of rules builds confidence for sure. It manages behavior. It manages behavior within the group, and also it manages behavior of a learner while learning. Yeah, it might be in a group or independently, individually. So it's something that students can take from lessons into their life. Then it helps to feel safe. So if your students know that they won't be punished for something, or they won't be blamed for making mistakes, or for introducing their creative ideas, then they feel more confident, and they will once become um, more autonomous. Then routines and rules positively influence the teaching and learning process for sure, and it brings fairness and equality to your lessons. All the routines and rules can be divided into three categories: administrative procedures, instructional tasks, and interactive routines. So this is all about different aspects of the lesson. And by establishing these routines, um, students learn how to um, what to expect in the lesson, what to do, how to do, how to interact with people, how to communicate, what is expected. And when students know the procedure, when they know what your instructions mean, when they know in what way to communicate, to interact with students, they become more confident and more autonomous. The next thing is a reflection. We discussed that it's a very important skill for learners to become autonomous learners. There might be different types of reflection. There might be reflection after the lesson when you just elicit what have you learned from the lesson. What were the most challenging words for you to remember? What were the most challenging words for you to um, pronounce? What was the uh, new idea that you've learned from today? So they can be really small tasks, or just a couple of questions for students to reflect, and for you as a teacher to collect some information for further work on their knowledge, skills, and abilities. There might be reflection worksheet at the end of the term, at the end of the topic, at the end of the school year, and so on. So there are a lot of different templates online. You can search for them, you can create your own ones, and to use them for your purpose to develop students' autonomy. Then there are different approaches and frameworks that are used and nowadays, and that lead to students' autonomy. So what are they? Communicative approach. Of course, it prepares and it focuses on real life communication. Students are able to experiment with language because they interact with each other, not with a teacher, and they need to solve particular communicative problems on their own. They need to make their own decisions. They need to use different strategies to um, ask for help, for example, or to paraphrase, and so on. Then it reduces students' dependence on teacher, and they become more like independent or interdependent with other students. Then task-based learning. It is about developing the ability of problem solving. It's about using language in practical ways, not just completing tasks from the book. It encourages self-reflection, and it provides the chance for students to take control over their learning process. Cooperative learning. So students interact more actively with their peers. They learn, teach, support, and challenge each other. They develop self-regulation, and also they get and provide feedback of each other's performance or works. The next approach, project-based learning. So it for sure develops critical thinking. We discussed that it's important for um, completing tasks, for using particular strategies, for evaluating their own progress. It promotes independent research. It encourages flexibility and responsibility of students for their learning. And it also requires self-directed inquiry from your students. So students become uh, researchers. They need to investigate something on their own, not depending on the teacher. And the last one that I wanted to mention is flipped classroom. So the idea of flipped classroom is that students um, get some knowledge of the topic that they are going to discuss during the lesson. And why is it helpful and useful, and how it motivates students' autonomy. So students become responsible for their studying because they prepare for the lesson. They can be more confident because they know what topic they are going to discuss. They can prepare as much as they need. They can. It encourages self-paced learning. So if the student needs to watch the video once or to complete the task a couple of times, or maybe to do some extra research to get ready for the lesson, or just to revise the task, the topic again and again before the lesson to feel more confident and autonomous. Students actively apply knowledge in the class because the lesson time is spent not on introducing new material, but rather on practicing it in different contexts, in different types of activities. And then it reduces passive learning because students have already some knowledge. They feel more eager to participate and to discuss because they already have some tools, some grammar or some vocabulary to work with. Then making a lesson student-centered. Of course, it also has some benefits for development of learner autonomy. So there are some steps to take in order to make your lesson student-centered. So encourage active learning. So you do not introduce the material to them. So students are more engaged into discussions. You do not have a teacher-student interaction, but they are more active participants of peer work or group work, solving different activities and problems or just tasks. Then give students choice. The higher level of proficiency your students have, and the older they are, the more choices they can have during the lesson. They can choose the format of the task. They might choose the topic to write the essay about. For example, you can provide them the list of topics and they can decide which one to work on. Then promote inquiry-based learning. So create situations where students need to search for the information on their own to analyze something. For example, guided discovery is a very useful method here. Implement peer collaboration. The more students interact with each other, the more focus from teacher goes to students, and the more active they become, the more situations and experiences they gain, and the more autonomous they become, because they are introduced to different situations and they need to manage them on their own. Add self-assessment and peer assessment, and students can reflect on their strengths. They will focus on what they are good at, what they're not that good at, and you can work on different methods on how to help students improve. Integrate technology. So ask students to use different digital tools, online resources, multimedia. It brings variety and it brings personalization to your students' learning, and they might use different sources of information in order to search for the answers to the particular task, or to complete the project, for example. The next one is strategies. The strategy to develop students' autonomy is teaching them strategies to complete particular tasks. For example, students might have a reading task where they need to identify whether the statement is true or false. So you can teach them to pay attention to the task itself, to the statements, to underline keywords, to search for the keywords or their synonyms in the text. So explaining them how to work with the task will bring more understanding to students how to work on different tasks, how to do it better, what might be helpful. Of course, there might be not only one strategy working with one particular type of task. So then provide options, or you might elicit your students, how do you do this? And then let them get to know the list of options of strategies working on a particular task, and then to choose the one that is better for them. Then if we are speaking about, let's say, preparation to specific exams, how to work with particular tasks, where the students need to look at the pictures, or they need to search for synonyms, antonyms, or whatever. So knowledge of how to work with different tasks definitely influences the students' autonomy in general. And the last one is elicitation. It can be elicitation of different things during the lesson. For example, you can elicit the understanding of the task from your students. You can demonstrate the task and elicit what exactly they need to do. In this way, the learners will get to know how to work with some these types of tasks. You can elicit CCQs, concept checking questions, when you work with grammar or vocabulary. So you might ask some questions leading to students' better understanding of the topic. So these are some main strategies to develop learners' autonomy. There might be more, of course, but we have the limited time. So that's it for today. I would be glad if you share your ideas, if you reflect a little bit in order to become autonomous learners, and in order to remember things better. So please write in the chat, what were the key insights from the webinar that resonated with you the most? What specific action will you take to develop learner autonomy in your context, in your particular group, in your particular situation? Which aspects of learner autonomy would you like to explore further? Maybe some aspects you need to discover to learn more about. So you might write it in the chat. It would be nice if you share this, or you can take notes for yourself to know what to focus on later. I want to thank you for your attention. I hope something that was mentioned today was useful for you and your students. I want to remind you of some things that I mentioned at the beginning. So if you want to get a certificate, you need to pass the test that you will receive within 24 hours after this webinar. You need to gain at least 80% of correct answers in order to get the certificate. The number of attempts is not limited, so you can try again and again. And don't forget to use the information from our webinars in your lessons, in your teaching experience. So thank you for your attention. I wish you good evening and new achievements in your teaching experience. See you next time. Goodbye.